Welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered. Today, we have me, Maz, Hannah, Umama, and Amina, and we're going to be talking about taboo topics in Muslim families. So, I feel like there's a number of different topics that we could kind of discuss when it comes to the taboo topics in the Muslim families. So, what would you guys consider a topic of discussion?
So I would start off with finances. So I don't know if you guys can all agree, but growing up, I don't know if this is like a Desi community thing, a Muslim family thing, but for my family, I've noticed in other Desi families, but they do not talk about money. Like, if you ask your parents, like, if they're like quietly discussing something about money, I'm like, oh, what are you guys talking about? They're like, oh, don't worry about it. It's like adult talk. And every single time, like, up until I was like, what, a couple of years ago, then I started openly knowing about like my family's finances and stuff like that. And that's because my dad, like actually included me. Like my sisters still don't know what's like where we're at like financially and stuff like that. So I feel like that's one thing that they really don't talk about, and I think it's also because they don't know how to talk about it with their children. Would you guys agree? Like, is that the same thing with you guys?
Is it because you don't think they want like you to worry and stuff?
That yeah, that too. Like they never want us to worry, but then also it's also like this thing was like, oh yeah, you don't understand. Like, you won't understand what's going on. You don't know what to do with this, and that. And then like it also like suppresses that side of like you wanting to know what's going on. And I feel like that's not good or healthy because I feel like growing up because that won't help you in the future like when you have your own personal finances to deal with. So I just think it's really important to have that conversation like as a parent to have it with your kid, obviously not when they're young, but it should be a conversation when they're a little bit older, if anything.
I think that contributes to why a lot of kids in our generation are not financially literate because
Mm-hmm.
that kind of starts at obviously our education system doesn't help, but like it kind of starts at home. For me, I grew up in a single parent household, and when I was younger, we were a little less well off, and so my mom kept everything to herself about like our family's finances and stuff. Like I had like hints of what was going on with our family's finances, but nothing like no real clear picture of how things were going with my mom. Um, and I don't know, that had an effect on me because on one hand, I do understand that she did it to like protect me and my sisters and not stress us out. But on the other hand, like I still knew about it. So at the end of the day, it just felt like she wasn't being completely honest with
Mm-hmm.
me, and I don't know, it felt unnecessary to me. Like I feel like I would have been able to handle it, and she just like no, which I can understand. Obviously, I'm not a parent yet, so like I do understand the idea of like wanting to protect your children, but at the same time, it's just like level with them, be real with them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it'll pay off in the end. But that's kind of where I'm coming from.
What about you, Hannah?
Oh, in my in my household, it's not like finances are like a big secret or anything, but we also like didn't I don't know, it's not like my parents like treated us like we were adults in a sense, but they were also like not worrying us about finances or anything. It just wasn't so hush hush like for other people, I feel like. What
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had two older siblings, so like, I feel like for me, like it was like I never like kind of either asked or was no, I was never like a part of any of the discussions either, kind of like you guys. But I feel like if anything, like my sisters might have kind of like known, and they would kind of trickle it down to me and tell me like, hey, like like don't ask for this or don't try to like do too much or whatever because like of whatever situation there was. But I mean, I feel like I don't as we got older and stuff. I think depending on the people, like for me, like for my family specifically, like we were very independent people. So like we would get our own like jobs, and we would kind of pay for things on our own, and we kind of just faded away from like having our parents pay for stuff. Even though again, like if they were perfectly capable to, it's just like we didn't really want to, right? Because like I feel like the new generation of people is kind of just doing that, right? Like working on your own, working young or whatever. So you kind of like afford stuff, so you don't have to necessarily go through your parents. But what other topic do you guys think is another taboo topic in a Muslim family?
I think for me, health and hygiene was something that is a bit of a taboo topic. And not just with my family, but also I went to Muslim school, and this was something that I loved Muslim school, but at the end of the day, there were some things that they did poorly, and like handling the topics of like health and like how to take care of yourself in like an Islamic manner. I don't think that it was handled the best. Um, Like, for girls, for example, learning about their menstrual cycles. Literally, the only thing that I remember being taught, both by my mom and by the school, was that it was a time when women couldn't pray. And, at the time I was like, okay, I guess that's all I need to know. But there was so much more that went into it. From a health perspective, I didn't know anything about like the other symptoms that came along with it, and for me, I have a disorder. I don't want to get into it, but like I have like a lot of pain that comes with it. So, man, I was just told, oh, that's normal, and it wasn't. And I didn't learn that until I was 22. And that's frustrating because it was just like, I don't know. I was kind of told that I had to suffer through it instead of being sat down and like taught this thing that's kind of important that's going to affect me for the rest of my life. And then from an Islamic perspective, something that, I mean, honestly, either my mom or the school could have done is just like, when your cycle is over, you're supposed to do ghusl, right? And I actually didn't learn that until I was a teenager. And I feel like that's just something that you need to know.
You weren't even taught that in Islamic school?
No, I wasn't taught that in Islamic school. And
No.
and I was just like, if you're going to teach me about it, tell me, okay, that, yeah, I can't pray at this time and everything. Why wouldn't you tell me like the whole story, like all of it? And I did learn in a Muslim setting, but it was at Muslim youth camp. Shout out to them. They're great. I learned a lot there, but as Sarah Auntie pointed out behind the camera, that that was still like an all-girls setting, so it was still like more comfortable. But I do think that like boys benefit from learning about it as well, just like we benefit from learning about it, like learning about the boy side as well, because like at the end of the day, when we grow up, we're going to be parents to both boys and girls, inshallah. And so like that's something that we're going to need to know. And I don't know, I don't want to say I hold resentment, but it is a little frustrating that like I grew up hearing that like there's like etiquette to how to like take care of your body, like how you're supposed to perform istinja after using the bathroom or something. Like I wasn't taught about that. I wasn't taught about like cleanliness. I wasn't taught about like grooming or like even how to like wear the hijab properly. I kind of just like was self-taught or camp taught. I don't know. And I don't know. I feel like that parents and families in Muslim school, what they did is like whenever it was brought up, they would be like, no, we're not going to talk about that here. They would literally, I would ask questions and I would be shut down. And I was like, I don't know, it feels kind of important, especially like from a girl's perspective. Like this is something that we're going to deal with for the next 40 to 50 years. So it's kind of like, I feel like we do need to discuss it, but they literally just like, they shut it down at every turn. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't even like us using the word period. So like we found like creative ways to say it, Mother Nature, Aunt Flo, Shark Week, all that nonsense. And it wasn't like looking back on it, it was annoying. Like and they also like were kind of just made me carry this shame that it was something that was wrong, even though it's like, it was how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us and it's a natural part of our lives. And for most of us, like it's literally every single month until you're an old woman. So it's like, it's not something that you can just like ignore.
I think I find that interesting how you said like how the guys and the girls should be kind of aware of it, because for me growing up, my sisters were older than me, like anytime we'd be praying as like a family and stuff and they wouldn't be praying, I would just be like, oh wait, hey, why aren't they praying? And they would just be like, oh, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, don't ask questions, like just go do your own thing. And it's just like, okay.
And it just makes it like more of a shameful, like weird topic to talk about, which it shouldn't be. Like it's pretty natural. And going back to what you said about like Islamic school, like I would think you would have it somewhat better, like knowing it from an Islamic perspective. But even you said like you didn't know some things about it. Like even for public school, like you learned about it in 5th grade. They went over the basis, and then that's that. And then you'd have health again, like in middle school. But even when you did have health, it would just be about like very rare illnesses that not a lot of people get, and I would not benefit anything out of that. And then on top of that, like learning it from an Islamic perspective, I didn't go to Islamic school, but I did go to Sunday school, and they didn't talk about it there. So like honestly, like my mom would just like, it wasn't a topic that like my mom brought up to me, I had to bring up to my mom, because like I don't like I said, like it's not like a topic that they talk about like normally, and it's probably not a topic that they feel comfortable about. But like Amina said, like, it is a natural thing, and like especially if it's to your kids, like they should know the right way to do certain things, especially if it will like affect like how your prayers will be accepted. That's a really important thing as well. So like for me, public school wasn't any better. It was literally like learning on my own. And even when my mom did tell me, like, I did my own research on the internet because I was still confused. And even as a kid, like, I felt ashamed, like, asking my mom follow-up questions. So I was like, I was just pretending, like, yeah, I get it. But I really didn't. So
Because like when she's telling you, she's not like
She's-
telling you in like an open. It's kind of just
Exactly.
like she's telling you just to like that's it. That's the end of the conversation.
Like, don't
There's
ask any questions.
Yeah.
Just go on with it. But yeah, that's exactly what I had to do. It was a lot of like self-teaching, which it shouldn't be like that because it's something that should be talked about, especially to your kids. Because if they learned it somewhere else, like pretend if I learned it the wrong way, then like this whole time I was learning it the wrong way and doing everything wrong, and like my prayers weren't being accepted. But obviously, like if you don't know, like that's fine. You should just find a better resource, basically. But
Right.
I speak to like kind of like an opposite perspective because I didn't have that as much in my family, and to this day I don't have it in my household. It's not like it was something to be ashamed of. It's not something that my mom just didn't want to talk about. Like like we had that little mother-daughter heart-to-heart, But even like I think that this like shamefulness that especially in our cultures we surround with periods breeds that kind of environment where he was saying like like his sisters would not be praying and he would just be told like don't worry about it, stuff like that. But then that's like at least like they weren't praying and like he was told not to worry about it. There's like lots of girls who I personally know whose parents will have them pray with their brothers or their dads even when they're on their period just so that they don't have to tell their dad or their brother that they're on their period, Like, I think they get to a certain age where, they'll get to a certain age where they learn about that anyways, and they'll be like, hold on, like, something's wrong if you're praying every prayer
like
with
they
me
go
every
more out
single
of their
day.
way to like hide it rather than teach it, which is like so much easier to address. So.
And I never had that in my household either. Like, I've always been able to, if my dad tells me to go pray, I'll just tell him, like, oh, I'm not praying, you know? And I just think that it's not something that's shameful because it's something that happened. If it wasn't meant to be, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't have made it so. And so I think that if there's uncomfortableness and people want to approach it in like a more safer, I don't want to say safer, but like a more delicate manner, then that's fine. But it shouldn't be approached in a way where it's like something dirty and embarrassing, like, because it's at the end of the day, it's human anatomy. It is what it is.
Yeah. And that's something that they did a lot. And I feel like that kind of thinking breeds like internalized misogyny. It kind of makes women and like young girls especially not like themselves and think that they are inherently unclean.
It's already like such an uncomfortable situation to be in, like going through it. So like on top of that, when we have like this stereotypical sense of like not talking about it, just like hiding it, being really hush hush about it, like it doesn't make you feel any better, especially at such a young age. How is that going to help your self-esteem? So it's not any better for growing up.
Right.
But
You're already going through a week of uncomfortableness and like all the symptoms that come with it.
Girls.
Yeah, and it's like it's all like overall it's just not fun at all. And then when you're told like you have to like hide it and it's like dirty and wrong and it shouldn't be talked about at all too, it's like the whole process just becomes 20 times worse. For no reason.
Do you think it not being talked about is like a cultural issue, or do you think it's like a generational issue?
I think it's
it's
both.
It's both because even people I know are like, actually no, I don't think it's both. I think maybe it is generational because everyone I know now doesn't want to do that with their kids too. They don't plan on hiding all of this stuff with their kids, but they experience it for their parents. So I think every generation is going to get more progressive, more liberal per se. So I think it might end. It will never go away completely because again, when you breed internalized misogyny, you're gonna raise women that raise other daughters in the same.
But it'll be like switched. It'll be like more prominent to talk about it openly than it is to like
that
hush,
won't be like the more common ground.
exactly.
So I think it is generational, but it stems from culture. And that culture
stems from the generation.
And that roots in like internalized misogyny that's been taught to like our ancestors. So
I grew up in this community, which is like 95% Desi, and so that's why I do feel like it's a little bit cultural. So like the aunties that taught me, they were the ones telling me, no, you're not supposed to be talking about this. You're not supposed to use, like, I remember having here at we were in Quran class and they were like, Mina, it's your turn to read, and I was like, no, I can't. And the other girls in my class and one teacher who was like not even teaching. She was just like in there, and she was like, Mina, you're not supposed to talk about it like that. And I was like,
Like,
okay.
what else am I supposed to say?
Yeah, what am I supposed to say? It's just like, it's not like it's a lie.
Yeah.
You know, that's one thing if I was just BSing, but on the other hand, I was being completely factual about an event in my life. I also thought that I wasn't really taken seriously because I had that pain disorder. And everybody was like, oh, every woman goes through it. You know, you're not special and all of that. And I was like, well, And, of course, I didn't learn what was actually wrong with me until I was 22. But you mentioned something about public school that I kind of want to go back to.
Yeah.
They do teach about it in public school. Obviously, I only did the one that they taught in high school. And I think the biggest flaw with that is that it's so scientific. So they talk about, like, the shutting of the uterine lining, or for like reproduction, like the sperm meets the egg, and I'm just like, yes, that is all true, and that those are the facts, but that is not necessarily the best way to teach.
They don't talk about like the complications. They don't talk about like the insecurities that come with it.
Yeah, exactly. They kind of just focus on the science, and they're like, okay, we've done our job, and it's just like, it's so much more than just like the actual like biology and like the physiology, the function. It's so much more than that, and I feel like that's why both Islamic school and public school failed me. But I don't know. I wrote a whole paper on why like that type of education in like schools, both in like middle school and like high school, needs to rapidly shift.
That reminds me of like something funny that happened when I was in middle school, and we were doing like our science unit. We were doing like the reproductive system, and human anatomy. And this girl it was her turn. We like popcorn reading. It was her turn to like talk, and so she couldn't pronounce like the anatomical term for like our own genitalia. Like she said the word wrong because it was so taboo. She didn't even know like how to pronounce like her own body. Like,
and that is not
and what's funny is like a lot of kids like laughed at her, but like it was sad because how would she know otherwise if no one taught her better? And like the teacher was like mad that people were laughing, mad we had to do the unit. She was like, okay, we're just gonna have to get through this. Like it's part of the textbook. You have to learn it. It's like, what's wrong with human anatomy?
That happened when I was when I was at MCC too, and it wasn't even human anatomy. They were just using the word sex to describe, I think, like, the gender of animals or something. And literally, my classmates would, during popcorn reading, they would skip over the word. And at one point, the teacher would be like, stop skipping the word, just say it, just read it. And then a lot of them, they would either pause or they still wouldn't say it. And she would be like, okay, somebody else read. Or she would just bite the bullet and read it herself. And I just remember once my teacher got so angry at us for like laughing and snickering and everything. But we were 11, which like, I mean, honestly, any 11-year-old is going to react that way.
Yeah.
But if the teacher also is feeling like awkward and hush about it, then it's not like.
Yeah, well, there's a difference between 11 and grown, like old enough to have a degree and be teaching middle schoolers,
Yeah,
exactly. Like there's like a huge difference in both like maturity, mentality, like the experiences you've had and stuff. Like I teach little kids, so I know like if you say the word booty around them, they're done.
They're done.
Like
over.
Somebody accidentally burps first and they're over. But like at your grown age, if you're teaching kids, you got a whole career and all. Like you need to be a little more mature than that.
Yeah.
You know.
What about with like June being Mental Health Awareness Month? What do you guys think about the taboo topic of mental health in, I guess, Muslim families?
I think that it doesn't exist.
That conversation doesn't even come up because even like for my family sometimes too, if I'm like explaining like a situation that has to relate to mental illness, like their first response will be like, oh, like just pray, or like it's not even that serious, like that's such a like made up thing or whatever. And it boils my blood because it's literally like a scientific like thing that happens.
In your
it's
brain.
Literally like it's a literally scientific thing that happens within your brain. And I literally explain it to them, but then when I start to explain it to them, they're just like, oh yeah, whatever. They just brush it off. And like it's like no matter how many times I say it, no matter how many times I advocate for it, no matter how many times I have a discussion about this, it's just something that they're not willing to learn and accept. And it just makes me so frustrated. But then it just makes me have hope that I'm glad that I have an open mind, and like when it comes to my kids or the future generation, I'll be able to implement that, and then
Inshallah.
that generation won't be as closed-minded as the previous generation was when it comes to mental illness, which is such an important and serious issue to be talked about.
And it really is, because at the end of the day, there's Muslims that commit suicide, there's Muslims that are depressed, there's Muslims that are really going through it.
Exactly.
And they're not seen or supported.
They're not taken seriously, and even when they, and reaching out for help is like really a difficult thing to do. It's not the easiest thing to do. And when they do reach out for help, it's not like they have like an open community of support.
Do you ever think about like when a Muslim person commits suicide, like the first thing like uncle, aunt, or whatever will say like, oh, like they weren't a good Muslim.
Yeah,
they weren't.
exactly.
They weren't.
Their
They
iman
had,
wasn't strong.
It's like, oh, did you not think like, oh, maybe they didn't have good mental health. Maybe they weren't. They didn't have a good support system.
Exactly.
Maybe they didn't have like, good people surrounding
them. And that's so
them.
disappointing when someone literally takes their life away. That's the first thing that their reaction is. That's the first thing that they had to say. Like that like breaks my heart. Like why would you say that with someone who's literally deceased now? Like that's so disrespectful.
That's like a conversation I've had with some of my extended family, where they're talking about how they don't take people that committed suicide seriously, and they don't respect people that have committed suicide because like they were stupid enough to take their own life. But I don't think about it that way, because it's like, imagine how small and how upset and how hurt you must feel to let alone consider taking your own life, but then to follow suit. Like I think it's such a sad existence to be so like what they're going to be struggling so much that you think life isn't worth living anymore.
Exactly.
Like they were really going through like a lot. And then people go and like berate them and degrade them in death and all. Like, come on, like even like non-Muslims will say like rest in peace, don't belittle the dead. Blah,
and
blah,
on
blah.
top of that, like I've heard this like too from different families. Like if someone within their family has committed suicide, or even if they're going through something with mental illness, they literally will like lie and be like, oh no, it was like a heart failure, like it was like a health problem. And I'm just like, how you're lying on top of like someone's death. Like that's so messed up. And even if someone has like a mental illness problem, or like they can't function properly, they'll cover it up, but rather than just straight saying how it is. And it's something that should be normalized. Like it is what it is, and there should be more resources, especially within like the Muslim community as well, which everyone like we need to work on as a whole generation.
I think my family, so like from an Islamic perspective, I don't know. I didn't learn a lot about mental health while I was at MCC, which would have helped because I also didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until I was 24. And I would have liked to know that I had a learning disability while I was, in grade school. But that's neither here nor there. But for my family, mental illness runs on both sides of my family. And I mentioned this last year during the whole Black Lives Matter series, but I have a relative who was killed by police. And the primary reason that he ended up being killed is because he was schizophrenic and he didn't know where he was. And my family wasn't really
aware.
Oh no, they were aware, but like we didn't know how to treat it. And so like Black mental illness in the Black community, especially in the 90s, wasn't really well not established. I don't know how to say it. It wasn't really well treated. Like his medication was sedatives, so obviously he didn't like taking it. And so like when the police were called, he was unmedicated and had no idea where he was, and one thing led to another, and all of that ended up happening. So but even then, like with that having happened, whatever, I feel like there were still some lapses, like with my a mental illness within my family, because like my sister and I were both diagnosed with depression in our late teens, I want to say. And first, my mom was reluctant to let us try medication. And then when I wanted to go to like therapy or like a therapy program or whatever, she had to be convinced by like 2 separate therapists and like my sister and everything to let me go. Both the medication and like the therapy program ended up saving my life. But, my mom, even after everything she had been through, like with her brother, and then with her kids later on, she was still like, I don't know, not adamant. What's the opposite of adamant? She wasn't, I guess, on the side of science. She was just like, keep praying, make dua, do this, do that. But like when I wanted to, I guess, like trust my doctors and my therapist, she was still just like, I don't know. And that's kind of where I wish that
you had that support system.
I wish
or
I had a little bit
resources.
more of a support system.
Yeah.
I know that she necessarily didn't have the support that she needed. My family dynamic is very complicated. But, you know, I just thought that with everything that she had witnessed, that she would kind of like do a little better with her kids. But now I plan to do better with my future
Inshallah.
kids. So
Inshallah.
So that's all I can say.
The final taboo topic I kind of wanted to address kind of goes similar to like the mental illness is with special needs, right? So it kind of hits home to me a little bit more, you know. It's because I have some family members that are on the spectrum of autism. I volunteer for Molson, organization that helps understand special needs as well in the Muslim community primarily. But yeah, so pretty much it's just like I feel like it's kind of similar in the sense where you were saying how, you know, we don't kind of trust science, we trust the du'as, and we're just trusting that, you know what, like it'll kind of fix itself. But I guess I don't think a lot of, you know, Muslim families are educated on the topic and understanding that, you know what, this is something that can't just, you know, it's with like there's no medication that can fix autism, right?
Exactly.
You know, it's and the earlier you do it, the better, right? You can't just, you know, if you see signs, exhibiting signs, and a lot of parents, they'll kind of see these signs and they'll kind of just think, oh, you know what, they'll grow out of it, or it's just a phase, or my kid might be a little bit different, right? But they're never gonna kind of address the fact that, you know, like what about the option of if there's more to it, or if there's like a deeper thing, right? And again, I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen that, you know, like that early intervention, right? The early phases when you see it, and then you want to kind of, you know, provide the therapy or whatever else is necessary to kind of get, you know, help is the most important, it's the most crucial time, because again, it can progress very like quickly or, you know, it's depending on the kid, right? So I don't know, that's just something that I think is just needs to kind of be said more. And I'm a huge advocate for Molson just because they do so much, you know, within that community, and then just providing different ways to kind of help out and help us, you know, understand what we don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Mohsin is growing. But I do have like a friend that I grew up with, and she actually just told me this, but her dad is on the spectrum, but he went his whole life being told, no, that's not what it is. You know, he just is who he is. And like the entire family to this day is still like in denial that he is autistic. And another friend of mine, these are all Muslim friends, by the way, she literally straight up said, yeah, autism doesn't exist in my family. And I'm just like, how?
That's very
and it is, and it like it's not just, and it didn't really exist in my family. I have a cousin who I'm like 99% sure was on the spectrum. He never got tested, and yeah, my family was kind of just like, oh, you know, he's just being him or whatever, you know. And he was a fully grown adult, nonverbal, not really like functional or independent or anything like that. And I'm like, nobody wonders why. And so I don't know. I feel like us talking about all of this is like a sign that we're trying to do better. You know, we're trying to do right by the next generation. Like whenever they get here. But
Any last words?
All I have to say is, like, you know, I feel like generation by generation we keep getting more open-minded, but obviously like practice what you preach. So inshallah, like, you know, when we are parents, we like what we basically said on this podcast, we follow through with it, because, you know, easier said than done too. So inshallah, like what we're saying on this podcast, everyone, you know, that's watching this podcast takes it back home and, you know, agrees with what we're saying, and then we'll realize that, like, you know, it's really important to educate the future generation as well, so we don't just keep repeating these steps that have happened like within our culture and everything. So inshallah, like, we make those steps towards like a better generation.
Well, with that being said, thank you. We hope to maybe even continue this topic, you know, this conversation, just because, you know, this is something that's big, and, you know, we just kind of thought of some topics off the top of our heads, but you know, if there is something that you guys are interested, there's definitely more to say. So I mean, if there's something that you're interested in, please comment, like, and we'll see you guys next week.